Today we'll be discussing the article Blue Gold Rush, Water Privatization Imperils Low-Income Communities in the United States by Juliet Beck. While this article is only 3 pages, it does bring to light a major topic in the social justice and environmental worlds. It is definitely a current events article, even though this article was written in the summer of 2004. Quietly across the nation, and even in other countries, towns, cities, neighborhoods have been selling off their water systems that they used to privately own to public utilities, to public companies. So they are privatizing the water systems. In Philadelphia, the city still runs the water system, so it has not been privatized yet. There has been many private companies who have tried to buy the Philadelphia Water Department because it is not super structurally sound, but it is a very economically, I guess, prosperous system to buy, because there are a lot of people who feed off of it. There are parts of it that are in disrepair, but as of this moment, the city still owns our water system. So this article discusses a lot of places that have already sold off their water systems to private companies. My town 2 years ago went through a large bidding war for our water system, and we wound up selling our water system for, I think it was $16 million. Yes. And I live in a pretty small town of about 5,000 people, and our water system in complete disrepair was worth $16 million. So, we don't realize this, but the reason that this privatization has come about is because technically the federal government is supposed to give funding to cities, towns, neighborhoods to help with the upkeep of their water systems. And the reason is because we don't really charge very much for water. And so the federal government was supposed to supply funds to help upkeep these water systems. But the federal government throughout the years has decided to withdraw this funding. And so it has left the burden onto the cities, the towns, the neighborhoods to have the capital income to have the upkeep of the water systems, the entire infrastructure. And so when I talk about privatization, I don't mean that private companies own water. They actually own your access to the water. So they own all the pipes, all the pumps, they own all of the sewers, they own all the water meters in your house. So they own all of that. They technically do not own water. No one technically owns the water. They own the access to the water. The problem is that when they own access to your water, they pretty much own water. This came about especially when my town was trying to sell their water system. Of course, I was highly against it. I went to all the public meetings, etc. And one of the big things was the fact that I'm technically not allowed to drill a well in my backyard. As per the town ordinances, I'm not allowed to do that. So no matter how much money this new private company is going to charge me for my water bill, I have to pay it or I don't have access to water. And this is a big social justice issue, and that is what's discussed in this article in a significant way. So, for example, Beck talks about this issue on page 38, about this issue with the towns, right, in disrepair and then selling their water systems. And it's right over here. Historically, cities created municipal water and sewage utilities to prevent the spread of communicable diseases like cholera. And then after more than a century of massive public investment, approximately 85% of the people in the United States receive their water from publicly owned utilities. However, as old water infrastructure crumbles and the federal government cuts funding, cash-strapped local governments are turning to private companies to remedy their water problems. And so what's happening is they're selling their water systems off. But when they sell their water systems off, they're selling them to private companies. And then, for example, down here, in the case of Atlanta, the city tried to buy back the water rights when they realized, like, holy mackerel, when private companies buy this, there's a lot of problems for our people. For example, they might raise the price of water to a significant level that maybe lower income people can't afford. There's also the debt issue, and I'm going to discuss that next, which is what happens when these companies charge, as soon as you don't pay your water bill, they send you to a collection agency. And then they charge the cities for the fact that they have to collect all this money. There's just an array of issues. And what happened was Atlanta saw this and tried to buy back their water system. But it was in excess of 10 million. Today, this article was written in 2004. Today, that would probably be in the billions. And the reason for that is these private companies come in and they tout how much infrastructure they have fixed. And then, of course, they're going to charge you more money. It's like fixing an old house and then flipping it. You're going to charge the new owners more money. And that is the case of public to privatization of water. So if you look here, this is the one of the big issues that Juliet brings to light. Private companies often promise to increase access and improve service to impoverished communities, but the real life experience of privatization is often disastrous for consumers and adds new hurdles for low-income families. According to research conducted by Public Citizens and other public interest organizations, privatization often leads to a weakening of democratic institutions and increased corruption, layoffs of public sector jobs, higher rates and cutoffs, and lower quality standards. And if you look over here, you could see that there was a big issue with Detroit. And what has happened since private people have taken over Detroit's water system? They've had major problems. And then, of course, the public bought it back again, but there's all sorts of problems that happen with Detroit's water system. So the one big issue with private companies, and I think that a lot of public officials seem to forget, is that right here it says, furthermore, corporations that exist to make a profit are less likely to consider the needs of low-income communities. And this definitely happened in Detroit. It's a major issue when we fail to recognize that increased water rates are a major problem for low-income individuals. And when we increase water rates, we have to take into account social justice issues. So one of the solutions that Juliet provides in this article, and it is one of an additional article that we have coming up that we're going to read, is how do we solve these social justice issues when privatization does occur? And Juliet brings to light what we call right here. She talks about it right in this part. They include expanding public and community controlled water utility. The solution to the world's water scarcity crisis are multiple. They include expanding public and community controlled water utilities, repairing dilapidated water system through public funding. That means maybe increase taxes, and those federal dollars are then given to the townships and the cities so that they can, perform the upgrades that are needed. But they also, by enhancing water reclamation and conservation programs, low-flow toilets, etc. So, corporate control of global water commons undermines these community-based common sense solutions. She also talks about the fact that we need folks who then can have, that when she talks about the community-based solution, she also means governance. So she wants people to be part of the conversation. So we do need low-income individuals who are part of the conversation with water governance, that are going to value and look at the rights of everyone that is involved in trying to find these solutions. And so to fight privatization, grassroots water justice activists are reaching out across the board to learn from communities, and they want people to be involved in the process. So when you have these ideas come up, they want people to have this governance. They want everyone to have a say in what's going on with their water systems throughout the world. So Juliet's saying we need governance. We need this idea of these community-based organizations reaching out, proposing new ideas, and it might need to come from the grassroots level. Now, this might be hard for people, especially in those low-income areas, because a lot of times the people in the low-income areas are working 2 and 3 jobs, they're trying to maintain their household, and then to start a grassroots organization is tough. But Juliet is saying that we need grassroots movements in order to make a change in privatization of water. And if we continue to privatize water resources, we're going to run into more social justice issues. So don't forget to read this article. Also, don't forget to take your quiz that relates to this article that can be found in this session.